Today we are talking about the novel The Stranger by Albert Camus, a 20th century French philosopher and winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Stranger is not a novel in which there are only philosophical points, but the novel is fundamentally rooted in the philosophy of absurdism. You see, with the advancement of science and knowledge in human societies, philosophers have come to the conclusion that the evidence and documentation do not suggest that the universe as a whole has meaning or pursues a specific purpose. Therefore, according to absurdist philosophy, human life lacks inherent meaning. Welcome to a new video from the Polaris North Star channel. Dear friends, thank you for supporting our content. Until a certain point in time, it was the institution of religion that gave meaning to human life, but philosophers said that it was not right to make a single prescription for the lives of all human beings, each of whom is unique. It is not right for some people to imagine a meaning for life and impose that meaning on all human beings. The existentialism philosophers said that every human being is free to create meaning for his own life and pursue his own goal. Man should not blindly follow the actions of others and let others determine his life, but he should create meaning for his life with his knowledge of himself in a unique way. The meaning of a parent's life may be to raise children. The meaning of a medical life may be to treat the sick. The meaning of another person's life may be to help the poor. The meaning of the life of a scientist may be to try to promote science through his discoveries and inventions. Also, the meaning of someone else's life may be to study to raise the level of awareness and teach what he learns. There are many examples that can be given because each of us humans can create a unique meaning for our lives. But there are people who, even for whom this is not acceptable, believe that life is fundamentally meaningless, and that trying to conceive of meaning in relation to something that is meaningless in nature is even more meaningless than the thing itself. You might say to yourself, someone who thinks this way is likely to commit suicide. Not necessarily, because suicide doesn't solve the problem. For someone who thinks it's absurd by nature, everything is meaningless, so suicide is meaningless. For him, as much as living is meaningless, not living is meaningless. As much as being is meaningless, not being is meaningless. Like Albert Camus, there were absurdism people who not only did not commit suicide, but also lived well, because they accepted the emptiness of life, made peace with meaninglessness, and achieved peace. The problem of the absurd human being seems to be only being. He no longer has anything to do with the meaning of being, so his mind and thoughts are free and serve only the senses of life. So he feels the experience of being at any given moment much more intensely than other human beings, while other human beings are more busy traveling in abstract subjects and their imaginations. They don't live in the moment because they're thinking about the meaning of something that is inherently meaningless. Meursault, the protagonist of the novel The Stranger, who lived there in the pre-independence era of Algeria, is inherently and unconsciously, he is an absurd. He has a strange personality. When he goes to the beach to swim, he meets a girl named Marie. They have a close and intimate relationship with each other and go to the cinema together that night. When Marie sees Meursault wearing a black shirt, she asks, "Are you mourning?" He says, "Yes, mommy is dead." He doesn't say, "I'm sorry my mother died." In general, his sentences are simple, concise, and short. He speaks like a child, just like a child. He lives only in the moment. Mary asks, "When did this happen?" Meursault says, "Yesterday." Marie is surprised and discovers that Meursault is not like a normal human being. He adheres to a kind of boundless honesty and truthfulness. He may not say everything he doesn't believe, but he sincerely believes everything he says. He is very kind to Marie and enjoys being with her, but when Marie asks him, "Do you love me? Do you want to marry me at all?" he replies, "It doesn't matter to me. If you like, we can get married." Of course, Meursault doesn't just treat Marie like this, but he treats everyone around him with extreme honesty. Meursault's identity is integrated. His appearance and his interior are not different. Usually, people are not like this. They make an appearance that covers their insides in order to live together in society and be able to tolerate each other. It is an unwritten social contract, a veil that hides the inner human being by pretending to be accepted in society. Just as we humans cover our body parts by wearing clothes for respect or anything else, in the same way, by observing the customs of society, we keep our inner selves hidden from each other. But Meursault is not able to do that. Not that he is not, because he follows a certain philosophical school. He is physiologically like this and instinctively behaves like this. Meursault is not a philosopher. His character and behavior are not the result of a particular philosophical school or thought. In principle, Meursault's thinking is more limited than other thought. He only thinks about the senses, and his thinking does not go beyond his actual experiences. This is not necessarily a bad thing. That thinking is a tool to get closer to the truth. When a person's thoughts are beyond his feelings and experiences, from one point to the next, instead of approaching the truth, he distances himself from it to the point where he is out of the circle of truth, to the extent that through the abuse of the power of thought, he creates an imaginary world in his mind, so that he does not realize that it is different from the real world. Meursault doesn't have that problem because he doesn't think about anything beyond his actual feelings and experiences. Meursault is strangers to the norms of society, strangers to pretense. Meursault is a stranger to unwritten social conventions. But a phenomenon called society, in order to protect itself, judges such people cruelly. In the story of the stranger, Meursault commits a murder for which he is sentenced to death by guillotine, a very harsh sentence, because he commits the murder without any motive or prior planning, under the influence of environmental conditions. An incident that cannot be called a premeditated murder or an accident. But none of this matters, because Meursault is judged in court in private for his character and convicted for his absurdity. It is as if the murder he committed is just an excuse to try him. The prosecutor said in court, "A person who does not cry at his mother's funeral and has fun with his girlfriend the day after his mother's death is not a human being." But when Meursault is asked if he loved his mother, he replies, "Of course I loved her, like everyone else." When the prosecutor asks him why he committed the murder, he says, "Because of the son." Not a meaningless reply, which drove the prosecutor crazy with rage. Now, what was the story? One day, when Meursault and one of his friends were walking on the beach, they encountered an Arab man who had a grudge against Meursault's friend and had come there to settle scores with him. Meursault's friend wants to draw a gun, but Meursault takes the gun from his hand. A fight ensues and his friend is stabbed by Arab man. Meursault takes her home and herself, suffering from severe heat stroke, returns to the beach and he encounters the Arab man again. The Arab man does not think of getting involved with Meursault. He just takes his dagger out of the sheath a little so that Meursault is afraid and does not approach him. The sunlight reflects off the blade of the Arab man's dagger and blinds Meursault's eyes for a moment. In heat stroke and anxiety, he shoots at the Arab man with a gun in his hand. He waits for a few seconds and then shoots the Arab man's body once more. Unlike Meursault's emotions are inactive, his five senses are intensely active. Hence, it feels heat more intensely than other humans. Any heat of the sunlight on the day of the incident, which caused him to suffer from heat stroke, as well as the reflection of sunlight from the blade of the Arab man's dagger, were the factors that caused Meursault to shoot. That's why when the prosecutor asks him why he shot him, he replies, "Because of the sun." But when the prosecutor asks him, "After the first shot, when you saw the Arab man fall to the ground, why did you shoot him 4 more times?" Meursault is silent, and his silence makes the court even more angry. It's not that he deliberately refrains from answering, because he really doesn't have an explanation for his actions. He doesn't know why he fired 4 more shots after the first shot and a few seconds passed. In fact, his action was meaningless. The main element of the universe, according to the absurd people, is neither water, earth, fire, nor air, nor mysticism and spirituality, nor love, nor God. The main element of the universe, according to the absurdists, is meaninglessness. In the story of the stranger, the sun, which is the main source of life, appears on that hot and sunny day, on the beach, in the behavior of Meursault, manifesting meaninglessness in the lives of human beings. The death of the Arab man is meaningless. Meursault's behavior is meaningless. The court sentences him to death to fight this meaninglessness, to give death to this symbol of meaninglessness, to deny the absurdity, to deny the meaninglessness. Meursault didn't have to admit that he waited a few seconds after the first shot and then fired the next 4 shots. And he could have said that he regretted what had happened, but he said that he was sad about the situation, but I can't say that I regret it. He could have said, "I was sad on the day of my mother's funeral," but he said, "Well, I wasn't sad. What should I do?" The trial of Meursault symbolizes an absurd person's encounter with a society that judges him in order to deny the meaninglessness of the universe, or at least pretend that life has meaning. But Meursault is unable to pretend. Although he is sentenced to death, it seems that at this stage, in front of a society that has become a symbol in the face of the judge, the prosecutor, and the jury, it is Meursault who is victorious. Because until the end of the court process, Meursault is not willing to pretend. He is not willing to deny the meaninglessness of what happened. But there is one more stage left, when Meursault spends days and nights waiting for the moment of execution in the dark 4 walls of the prison cell. The priest comes to him, and they have an interesting conversation, in which Meursault gets angry for the first time and raises his voice. Allow me read you a part of the summary of the book. I was lying in my cell, and as the sky turned golden, I guessed the arrival of the summer sunset. At this moment, it was clear that the priest had arrived, and I told him that, as was customary, he had to come at another hour. And he replied, "This meeting is quite friendly." He asked, "Why do you always refuse to meet me?" I replied, "I don't believe in God." He wanted to know if I was sure of this, and I said, I don't think much about it because it seems trivial to me. It may be so, and I may not be aware of all the things that may interest me, but I am fully aware of the things that I know are not my favorite, and I am sure that what you say is not my favorite. The priest asked me, isn't this kind of talk out of desperation? I explained to him, I'm not desperate, I'm just scared, and that's normal. He said, in this case, God will help you, and all the people I knew in your situation finally took refuge in him. I said, those people had the right to choose whatever they wanted, but I don't want anyone to help me, and I don't have time to be interested in something that I don't like. The priest controlled his anger and said, my friend, if I am talking to you, it is not because you are condemned to death, but in my opinion, we are all condemned to death. I interrupted him and said, this status is not the same as the others. He said, of course, but if you did not die today and you would die later, then you would still be afraid. And at that time, how would you endure this difficult ordeal? I replied, I will endure it just as I am at this moment. He said, then you have no hope and you live with the thought that you will die forever. I answered, yes. He said, I feel sorry for you, and I think that it is impossible for a human being to tolerate such a way of thinking. The priest spoke in an anxious and hurried voice. I realized that he was excited, and I listened to him better. He said, it is certain to me that your repentance will be accepted, but you must free yourself from the burden of the sin that you are carrying. Human justice is not important. It is God's justice that is important. I reminded him, for now, the same first justice, i.e., human justice, has condemned me. He answered, even with such a conviction, your sins will not be erased. I said, I don't know what the sin is. They have only made me understand that I am guilty, and now I see the consequences. I can't ask for anything more. He said, my son, you are wrong. You can ask for more than that. I want you to see. The priest looked around him and said, pain and suffering are leaking from all these stones. I know this, and I have never looked at them without sorrow. But I also know from the bottom of my heart that even the more miserable than you too, they have come out of the darkness inside these walls and have seen the face of God. And you could be asked to see these faces in these walls. I said, I've been looking at these walls for months. There's never been anything more. Anyone in the world so that I can within these walls. I find, by the way, for a long time I searched for a face among them, and that face was Maria's face, although I searched for it in vain, and now it is over. In fact, I see nothing in these walls except stones. I see pain and suffering, not the face of God. I see only stones in these stone walls. The priest said, how much do you love earthly life? I didn't answer. His presence weighed heavily on me and made me angry. I wanted to tell him to leave me alone, when suddenly, as he turned to me, he shouted in a special tone, no, I can't believe what you say. I'm sure you have lost your dream of another life. I answered, this dream is not important and has no value like the desire to be rich or to be a hero or to be beautiful, and such dreams are worthless. All dreams are in the same line. I told him, I don't have the patience anymore, but he still wanted to talk to me about God. But I went to him and tried to let him know for the last time that I had little time left and that I didn't want to lose it with God. I said to him, you are also with others, and you are judging me. He said, my son, I am with you, but you cannot understand this because you have a blind heart. I will pray for you." Then I don't know why something burst inside me that I shouted and cursed with all my might. I said, "Instead of praying, I'd rather he gets lost out of the cell." How sure he was of himself. None of his certainties were worth a single strand of a woman's hair. He wasn't even sure he was alive because he was living like a dead man. I didn't have anything to lose, but I was sure of everything, much more than he was. I had the right to live the way I wanted. I could have lived in a different way. Nothing mattered to me because everything was meaningless. Well, in the end, Meursault remembers the days and months he spent in a dark prison cell waiting for the moment of his death. From the furniture in her room to the memory of playing with Marie, the pleasure of her skin touching the sea water while swimming, the pleasure of lying on the sand of the beach and warming her body under the sun. Because Meursault had lived the moments of his life in the present, and because he had focused his mind on the real feelings and experiences of life, he had so many memories of the reality of life that he could have lived only one day, and then, for years, he could recall the memories of the feelings and experiences of that day. Meursault said to the priest, "If there is another life, it will be spent remembering the experiences of this life." Meursault will be executed in public, and the people will be happy with his execution, as if the execution for the crime of absurdism can give meaning to their meaningless lives. Meursault will be executed for excesses in real life. Meursault will be executed because he was different from others, because he was unable to pretend, because he was stranger to the unwritten conventions of society. After reading the novel The Stranger, we do not defend absurdism or recommend the philosophy of absurdism to anyone, but we try to understand the absurdists and not judge them harshly. Thank you for being with me until this moment. I hope this video is useful to you. Hit the subscribe button of the channel and put the bell on so that as soon as the new video is placed on the channel, you can watch it as the first person. And in the end, hello and the light of God's kindness shine brighter than ever.